Welcome back to Great Day, Washington. Happy Halloween to you. Okay, coming up, Confessions of a Funeral Director. It's a book about how embracing death more strongly can help you embrace life. Now, the idea of embracing death sounds nearly impossible, doesn't it? Well, I had a chance to chat with the author, Wilde, and this is his story about growing up in a funeral home. I'm standing in the middle of Oak Hill Cemetery. It's 168 years old, and I couldn't think of a better place to have a conversation with a sixth-generation funeral director who wrote this book. Sixth generation on one side, fifth on the other. I mean, the bloodlines, it runs deep.
Yeah, it does. It was a Romeo and Juliet type relationship. So my dad's side was actually a competitive funeral home with my mom's side that lived across town. So thankfully, we didn't follow through with the tragedy of Romeo and Juliet, and I was born out of it.
Was it a given that you were going to go into the family business?
There's a number of years where I didn't want to because I wanted something that was more life-giving. I actually became a humanitarian aid worker, and we trekked medical supplies at different places. So it wasn't a given. Although they did try to persuade me, my grandfather offered me a free car. And the carousel that hung over my crib as a child had hearses and caskets on it. That's a joke.
Okay, all right. Well, I was buying into it for a second because right here in the book, you do talk about, somewhere in here, about playing among the caskets.
Yeah,
so
we did.
I was going to buy it. But how did that shape your view of death as a child?
I experienced a number of tragic deaths. So I started working at the funeral home at 16, and I saw a lot of things that created in me a secondary trauma. And things that 16-year-olds don't normally experience, the death of children, tragic deaths from accidents, and it really shaped in me a narrative about death where it was entirely negative.
And your book is, you look at the more positive side of death,
Yes.
which I got to be honest, I mean, most of us have a hard time finding that silver lining or that positive aspect. What are some of the more positive things that we could look for?
They're hard to see because the narrative is so strong. Like, we've been told that there's nothing redeeming in death, there's nothing good in death. And so it's hard for us to see those spaces where community happens, where people find more individuality, where people grow closer to their own mortality. And I think the closer we can grow to our mortality, the better we become as humans, the more we embrace life, the more we pursue our goals.
What did it take for you to view death differently?
It was a slow process. Again, I've heard it said before that ideas have consequences, but narratives change our lives. So tearing apart this perspective, it was a slow pulling blinders off my eyes and being able to see things. It was a number of experiences where I saw the beauty in death in different funerals that I didn't think were possible. It took years to where I was finally able to embrace this positive narrative. I don't think funeral directors know how to cope with certain tragedies. Nobody does. So when there's a death of a child and we're dealing with it, the entire staff is just tense, more easily angered, and it's tough. I think one of the things that we do too often is we think that we can handle grief on our own, but grief is meant to be shared. And even for funeral directors, as we have our own sort of secondary grief, we have to find people that we can share it with, or it just eats us up inside.
You have a son. Is he going to go in the family business, do you think? Or
seventh generation.
Maybe.
He dresses up, and I had a call the other day, and he called me on the phone, and it's live, and he's like, "Dad, I'm getting dressed to go with you on the funeral." I'm like, "No, bud."
And in all seriousness, as a writer, Caleb's writing is beautiful. So, you know, it is a very revealing book, but it's also kind of a self-help book, so it may be worth picking up. But all right, we're back with more Halloween fun right after this.